Only a few days are left for the state legislature to reach agreement this year on casino gambling. Bills that would allow casinos have been approved by the Massachusetts House and Senate, but the two chambers have yet to reach agreement over a bill that could be signed by Governor Patrick. Both versions would allow destination casinos, and one of these could be located in East Boston. Much of the disagreement is about whether to have slot machines. While supporters say the bills would create more jobs and public revenue, there's also talk about the downside, whether in gambling addiction, traffic, or the effects on neighborhood businesses. We've tried to invite somebody with a local perspective to explain the advantages of gambling. Our guest tonight has a local perspective on the negative side. We'd like to welcome once again from Neighbors of Suffolk Downs, John Ribeiro. Thank you very much for being with us, John.
Thanks for having me back, Chris.
First of all, how would this work? Suppose that some kind of a consensus bill were signed by the end of the month. What happens next? Does that mean automatically there's going to be a casino at Suffolk Downs?
If it comes out with slots for the racetracks, then the slots would show up as early as next week or next month. They'd start to install them without any referendum or any say on the part of the neighborhood. If it comes out without slots, then the local neighborhood would have a say in whether a casino is sited at Suffolk Downs.
Now, you've been having a meeting, at least one recently, about how this would affect the neighborhood. We've heard about the bigger picture, the revenue, the construction jobs, the people working at the casinos, but what about the rest of the neighborhood?
Well, one of the first things that frightened me when I first started looking into this was I looked at what was happening around Ledyard, Connecticut, which is the community directly impacted by Foxwoods. And there's a horrible increase in lots of different types of crimes, including drunk driving, domestic battery, violence, other types of violent crimes as well.
What about the traffic congestion? Because I had some concern that you're going to have more people coming there, but maybe not necessarily all at once.
No, not necessarily all at once, but even on a busy Sunday afternoon during travel season, that whole area gets backed up. Route 1, which is not that far away, gets terribly backed up if it's a busy shopping day. And I can remember times before the Ted Williams Tunnel was in place where it used to take an hour just to get to downtown Boston. So that area hasn't been improved since then, other than with the Ted Williams Tunnel. And even today, you still see traffic where you'll have a state trooper that sits there and has to regulate the traffic lights. And that causes a tremendous backup in that area.
Now, of course, at Suffolk Downs, we have a facility that is still somewhat active, and there have been some people working there, some for many, many years. I mean, what would happen to them if you couldn't have casinos there? Well,
there's no guarantee that if casinos do come, that they will keep their jobs. There are racinos all over the country where racing days have been reduced, despite the fact that slot machines have been placed there. And our nearest neighbor in Twin Cities in Rhode Island is facing bankruptcy as well. So even despite the promises of the Suffolk Downs management, there's no guarantee that there's going to be improvement at Suffolk Downs or even more racing days.
But what else could you have there? I mean, this is not likely to be the next innovation zone in Boston, so what else could you put there?
Well, when you think about it, when you look at that area as a whole, that whole corridor north of Boston, the Route 1A corridor, you could put a technology park in that area. Now, that sounds kind of far-fetched, but if you can include that area with the Wonderland area and also the Route 1A area, the Linway, there's a lot of depressed businesses there. You could take advantage of that depression, maybe make it an economic development zone, and invite people to come in and build technology parks there. What's happened over the past couple of years is we've lost jobs. Fidelity, Bank of America, Texas Instruments have taken jobs out of state, most notably to North Carolina. And they've built huge technology parks there as well.
By the way, another factor here is, well, I guess it's money. There is a downside of casinos and slot machines, as you point out, but if you get enough revenue in return, that eases the pain. But what about the revenue here? What do you see going on?
Well, the revenue, the highest claims on revenue is, what I've seen, about $400 million a year. You'll also hear numbers that it's going to impact people, roughly 2% of people will become problem gamblers. And they're not really talking about the costs associated with problem gamblers, but I've seen numbers that say it's as much as $13,000 each. So if you take those and you extrapolate those out, you quickly eat into those budget revenue that you expect to see from the casinos.
So it's almost like creating a second tier of jobs, but not jobs we like to talk about.
Exactly. So you see a dependency on government.
What about the effect on neighborhood businesses? And I don't see this as necessarily boosting attendance at local restaurants, but I don't see it necessarily taking away anything either.
Well, what you're actually doing is you're creating an unfair competitive advantage, even just for the entertainment venue itself. The business plan for a casino requires that they allow them to serve low-price alcohol, allow them to smoke, so that they can stay inside as much as possible and spend as much money. Right away, right off the bat, even if you're just talking about another restaurant, that restaurant's going to be a partner with the state and have an unfair advantage over the rest of the businesses in the area.
Do you think much would be gained by just putting the brakes on things right now?
It's funny you should say that, because in 1999, a national gambling impact study was done, and that's exactly what they recommended. They said, if you're considering gambling, you should do an independent cost-benefit analysis. And our state just hasn't done that. They've looked at all the benefits, but they haven't looked at the costs.
But what about all these people who are in Massachusetts right now? They're crossing state lines, they're going to Connecticut, maybe New Hampshire or something, and they're just adding to the economy in those other states.
They're adding to the economy, but they're not adding to the problem gamblers here in Massachusetts, as much as would be the case were you to cite a casino at Suffolk Downs. What happens is, within a 50-mile radius of the casino, you start to create new gamblers. And that would be the problem. Every single T-stop in Boston would be a gateway into the casino.
What do you think about the politics here? Because let's say you live, I know you live fairly close here to the border of East Boston and the adjacent communities here, but you know, if I'm a state rep, you know, I'm not hearing a flood of phone calls saying that this restaurant's going to go under, maybe. I'm not hearing a flood of phone calls necessarily that traffic's going to just come to a halt. I'm saying, well, look, hey, I got labor unions asking for jobs. I got the governor who says he needs revenue. I got people worried about community centers, and you get a library shutting down in East Boston. I'm going to vote for this.
No, and that's a good, I can understand them wanting to vote for that. But we've been putting a lot of pressure on them from the community. And up until now, they've only been hearing from the unions and from the lobbyists. And what they are hearing from their constituencies now is that they're concerned, and they want them to take a step back and take a look at how this is going to impact our community.
By the way, what about the possibility that we could have a bill that calls for a referendum on a casino, assuming we're not going to have slots here? What do you see in it? Have you looked at other places where they've had referendums, and how much you think those are a good index of what people want?
Actually, I haven't looked at any place else where they've done a referendum. But what my gauge is from the community, and I've made my way, in addition to the meeting that we had on June 30th, to other community groups in and around East Boston. And the temperature is that people are concerned. Even people that want a casino, that favor gambling, want it done right. And then you start to talk about what does that mean to have it done right, and we know that our legislatures just haven't done their homework on that.
Okay. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
From neighbors of Suffolk Downs, John Ribeiro. Still to come, sports with Pat Flaherty after this message.